Hey guys, it's Tessa. So today we are doing a little bit of a different video than I would usually make. However, long story short, for Christmas, my husband got me a Nook. So I've been reading nonstop. And even before then, this whole last year of 2024, I was reading nonstop. I decided that if I'm gonna be reading nonstop, somebody needs to hear me yap about these books. I'm starting with an oldie but a goodie, as you saw from the title. I'm reviewing The Hobbit, the book and the movie series. Two big points to start off with. One, I didn't read a lot growing up because I hated it and didn't know that I was possibly dyslexic. Secondly, I have watched the Hobbit movies and the Lord of the Rings movies prior to reading either. I'm still working on reading the Lord of the Rings series and I just haven't gone through it yet. But the other point I want to make is I went to a weird high school where one of my classes was film and I became a snobby person when it came to watching movies. I'm mostly over that now, but that doesn't really matter. The project I'm working on today is going to be one of my hoods. I've been working on a couple different horn patterns that I want to start adding, and so I'm going to make, I've already made one that has little devil horns on the front that should be listed by the time this video goes out, and if it's not, yell at me. And so this one's going to be done similarly, but it's going to have ram horns instead of little devil horns. So, carrying on. I really liked the book. For the no spoiler synopsis of the book / movies, little Hobbit Bilbo runs into Gandalf in front of his home, and Gandalf's kind of a menace and is like, I think you want to go on an adventure, my guy. While Bilbo the whole time's like, nah, I'm good. See ya. Toodaloo, Captain. And Gandalf's real convinced that Bilbo wants to go on this adventure for a reason. We don't really know what that reason is, other than he thinks he wants it. Or he thinks he wants it. So then Gandalf puts a sigil on Bilbo's door that can only be seen by other party members, and 13 dwarves show up to his house the following day. Them dwarves are like, hey, Gandalf told us that you're gonna join us, and we're gonna get back our mountain. The mountain's called Ereborn, or the Misty Mountain. And the leader is named Thorin Oakenshield, and he's like, yo, I don't think you can do this. You're just some little hobbit from the Shire, you don't know shit about shit. And Bilbo goes, you're right, I don't know shit about shit, leave me be. Bilbo wakes up the next morning, he still has the contract available, and that little part of him that did want to go on the adventure chooses to do so. The adventure ends up going, or the book and movies end up going into the story of kind of what happened with Ereborn, what happened with the company and all of that, and continues through their journey and everything that's happened since then. The more spoiler version of that basically is just Bilbo ends up going on the adventure with all these dwarves and Gandalf. It goes over about a year time span of them trying to get to the mountain with several different stops on the way. Most of them not of their own volition. And then when they get to the mountain, there's the dragon that's taking over the horde. And at least in the book, the dragon is killed almost immediately, and nobody knows, or none of the 14 members know. And then the battle happens, which again in the book, we don't even see. But I kind of just wanted to review a little bit of my main frustrations when it comes to the book versus the 3 movies of hell. Firstly, for the book, the first 3 pages kind of just goes into Bilbo's family lineage, which I feel was kind of unnecessary, or at least that extensiveness was unnecessary. Basically it's talking about how Bilbo's dad, Bunko Baggins here, is just a dude. He built this hole in the ground for his family, and he just loves the Shire. While Bilbo's mom's family, Belladonna Took, comes from a family of Tooks, who are the most adventurous hobbits you've ever seen. They even make a quip in the movie that's also made in the book about how one of his great-great-grandfathers was big enough to ride a real horse and somehow managed to invent the game of golf in the middle of a battle. And we spent 3 pages discussing that to start, and I appreciate the context, but I don't know if 3 pages was fully necessary for that. The thing that really bothered me about the 3 pages though wasn't even that it was 3 pages, it's that we very quickly went from we're talking about his family to when Gandalf and Bilbo meet for the first time, quote unquote, at least for all intents and purposes, the first time. And they're kind of going back and forth a little bit, and Gandalf at one point's like, aha, you just told me you want to go on an adventure. And Bilbo goes, no, I didn't, bud. I don't know what you're talking about. Honestly, I don't know what he was talking about either. I reread it a couple times, and I still don't think I understand what he's referencing exactly on what Bilbo said to him. But that could also just be my own denseness. Again, I didn't read a lot growing up, so my reading comprehension's maybe not as good as it should be. And even in the movie, like, I feel like it's really hard to understand almost why Gandalf does what he does. Or ends up putting the sigil and all of that. Maybe I just, again, lack the context. I also wish, specifically for the movies, that we went into more of the shit that happened in the book. Two of the biggest things that we changed in the movie, the movies from the book, is we included Azog the Defiler, the orc that's essentially following him the whole time. And then we also included the love story of Tariel and Healy, which, don't get me wrong, I'm fine with including that. I guess it makes some sense. But I wish we actually touched more on the Eagles when they catch everybody, when they catch all the dwarves and Bilbo in the end of the first movie. We find out some context from the Eagles that Gandalf helped the leader, and was in his debt. I kind of want to know more about like the wargs, excuse me, and the goblin meetup. So really what we changed was the end of the first movie, where they get out of the goblin mines of Moria. They end up going to this cliffside, and then that's when they climb up into the trees, and Gandalf starts shooting the lit on fire pine cones down at the wargs and the orcs. And then we also see, officially for Thorin's sake, that the Azog the Defiler is still alive. And it's like, dun dun dun, Eagles come grab them, movie over. However, in the book it plays out a little bit differently, where instead of Azog going up, it's them fleeing into the mountains and into like this small forest that has a nice clearing. They can hear wargs in the background, and I believe they can hear like screams of goblins coming after them still. So they quickly climb into the trees surrounding them, and for whatever reason, I believe it's because Bilbo has the ring at this time, he can understand the wargs. So they're talking about, they're like, all the wargs come to the opening place, or the opening space of that forest, and the wargs are talking about how they're going to be working with the goblins again to raid another village soon, and they're just waiting for them to show up. Gandalf, I believe, also understands this, so he starts getting a little like antsy, and eventually, somehow, I can't remember exactly how, but the wargs find out that, you know, all of them are up in the trees. So they start clawing at the trees, barking at them, growling at them, trying to get them down and stuff. So that's when Gandalf starts lighting the pine cones on fire, and because it's a magical enchanted flame, it keeps their coats lit on fire unless they're rolling around to actually kill it. And then we end up running into the goblins a little bit, who show up shortly after that and are trying to climb the trees as well. The wargs at one point decide to start running into the forest where the dwarves are held up, because if it's going to be an enchanted flame anyway, might as well do some damage. Then, just like in the movie, Gandalf speaks to a little butterfly, and eventually the eagles come and save them and bring them to their little home temporarily. And I just kind of wish we stuck a little more to the book, because I feel like that just worked better, it flowed better, it was just better. Also, I should say this as well, you can disagree with me on this. I don't really care. I just need to yap about something, and this is my current fixation, is yapping about The Hobbit, and my husband's tired of hearing it. He's tired of it. He hasn't said he's tired of it, but I know he is. All my friends are tired of it because I bitch about it all the time. But you're welcome to disagree with me. I would love a new perspective, love more context if you'd like. Anywho. And then in movie 2, we end up getting to the chapters with Beorn, I believe is how you say his name. But it's the giant shapeshifter guy. He shapeshifts into a bear. And for the most part, it's pretty similar, I'd say. The only thing that I feel like is really different is I feel like in the movie, he's way more standoffish than he is in the book, but I also wonder again if that was part of it just for screening purposes. It looks a little bit better. Because even though he was standoffish in the book, he very quickly came to understand like what was going on and was like, okay, I get it, fair enough. However, I feel like in the movie, all the way up until they left, he was very standoffish and hesitant for whatever reason. Obviously he had some reason to be, because he was trapped by dwarves previously and then was stolen by orcs and all of his kind were killed. I think the only other change they really make in that set of the scene as well is in the book, the first night they're sleeping there, or not the first night, the second night they're sleeping there. First night in the book, they show up and Beorn's not home. But they go and hide into his shed, I believe, or one of his barns or something, just so they sleep in safety. They close the doors and everything, and they're good. The next day, when Gandalf's like, hey guys, we gotta tell this man we're here, or he might kill us. So they go, they do the same introductions they do in the movie, which I think is sweet that they kept the similarity there. But the other big change we have is the first night after Beorn knows they're there, in the book, we get this sweet setting described to us of all of these bears, very clearly from all over the woods, all over the area, and they're dancing. Bilbo can't sleep, so he looks out the small little like section of where like the door separates, or like part of the wall separates and shows like a window piece, and he can see these bears dancing out there, and it's almost like a ethereal, almost, as I believe is how it's described. It's like mesmerizing to look at. And even though that's still such a small notion and doesn't really end up meaning anything in the book later on or anything, it just provides us more context on who Beorn is and what he does for the area. And then after that night is when they end up getting a ton of supplies from Beorn. He provides them with bread, goods, honey, milk, cheeses, butters, I think like a ton of food and stuff, so that they can get through Mirkwood. Obviously, as we all know, Mirkwood does not end out very well. But I think Beorn's storyline in the book is better just in general than it is in the movie. But again, personal preference. In addition to that, I forgot to write this in my notes, so I'm kind of just going to yap about this for a split second. But when they go into Mirkwood, a lot of it's pretty much the same as it is in the book. Something feels off. It feels like there's a sickness of the woods. Bombur, I believe. Bombur? Yeah, Bombur ends up still hitting the lake and falling asleep for indefinite amount of time. They did change out how that happens though. I think that's one of the few changes they made that's for the better. In the book, there's like a small little boat that is positioned on one side of the lake with some vines hanging atop, and it's very clear that if you stand in the boat, you can pull on the vines to pull you to the other side. And with that, in the book, they go through each one at a time, no problem. And then when Bombur goes to do it, his foot slips and he ends up falling out of the boat, landing into the water. In the movie, as you probably know, instead they're just vines, very heavy vines that they're using to move across the lake. First they have Bilbo go, and then everybody else goes. And then in the middle of that, Bombur ends up falling asleep due to the sickness of the woods, and he ends up collapsing and falling into the water. I think that just worked a bit better than it could have even in any other format, really. I think that was just the best way to do that. And then they spend significant amount of time continuing to try to go through the forest. Eventually they get bombarded by the spiders, which again, they also changed some of this as well. Before they get to the spiders, so before they end up getting to the spiders and being taken by them, instead in the book, they end up seeing, the dwarves and Bilbo end up seeing this like light faintly out off the path, and they send Bilbo a couple times to try to go over it, and then abruptly it's snuffed out. And this happens 3 or 4 times, and Bilbo's quickly getting fed up because they just want help. And whatever that light is, or the music they're hearing in the background, it just keeps dissipating. Eventually he moves off so far from the path and from everybody else, and he ends up falling asleep similar to Bombur. He ends up waking up pretty quickly though, and realizing that everyone has been taken by spiders. So again, in the book, he slips on his ring, and ends up taunting the spiders quite a bit, getting them to go away and eventually freeing his friends. In the movie, there is no scene with that light they're seeing. There's an implication applied to it a little bit later on, but I think it still would have been nice to see it versus just hearing the implication. Also, something that low-key just annoys me so much, and it really shouldn't, because it annoyed me reading it in the book, and I wasn't really a big fan of it, but the fact that they didn't include it in the movie that much really annoyed me. In the first movie, the group of dwarves, I keep wanting to call them orcs and they're not orcs. The group of dwarves end up singing about the Misty Mountain or the Lonely Mountain. And they sing it twice in the first movie and then never again in any of the other two movies. In the book, these bitches are singing all the time. Sometimes it's just repeating the song, but even then I think the movies could have done a nod to that by having the same beat playing in the background as they do when it's first sung, and then it's never sung again. In the instance of the spiders, when Bilbo realizes that the spiders have taken him, he starts singing a song, taking his ring on and off to be like, hee hee ha ha, you can't catch me, ha ha. And he ends up getting them far enough away for everybody to get away from the spiders, and then they're taken by the elves. I realize I might be like being kind of crazy when I'm talking about this, but I'm trying. Some other things that kind of just annoyed me a little bit that I just want to touch on lightly. Let me lay out the breakup of the three movies versus the book's positioning on the book pages. First of all, don't understand why this was broken up into three movies. If you really needed to, I think it would have been smarter to do it as two movies instead. But basically we have three 3-hour-long movies, and I think this could have been done into two 2-hour-long movies instead. Here's why. Movie 1 covers pages 1 to 111. That's all the way from the start of the book all the way up to the point where they get out of the mines of Moria and are picked up by the eagles. I think that's actually a pretty decent stopping point, since that's roughly just under halfway through the book. Movie 2 goes over pages 112 to 232, which is basically everything after the eagles up to them getting to the mountain and Bilbo talking a little bit to Smaug the Terrible. And then movie 3 covers pages 233 all the way to 305. Again, we are also missing several sets of information from the book to the movies. So really, you can probably take like 10 to 15 pages out of each of those sections. Roughly, these movies are broken up roughly about equal throughout the book, which is kind of nice. However, one of my biggest gripes with this whole damn thing is movie 3 is almost exclusively about the Battle of the Five Armies. I get it, we need to take some liberties sometimes to make things look a little cooler than they should be. But we don't know anything about the goddamn battle in the book. Bilbo gets knocked out 10 minutes in. The fuck? No, but I do like that they included the battle. Again, I wish it wasn't so much focused on Azog, but they already started moving those plots forward. It makes sense. I feel like we just spent too much time on these plots that did not happen in the damn book. Like, for example, another big thing that really irked me about the 3 movies of The Hobbit is there were several times where we set up the wink wink nudge nudge towards the Lord of the Rings movies, like Gandalf would leave for a little bit, and it was very clear that we were setting up the whole plot of the 3 Lord of the Rings movies in books, which I just thought was like slightly annoying. Like, I would have been fine with them doing it like once or twice, but they did it like 5 or 6 times, and I'm like, we get it. We totally get it. He's setting up and doing all the stuff for the preface of the Lord of the Rings. I get it. We understand. And then we had the whole weird romance thingy that and nothing even came of it, so I personally don't understand why it was in there. And then we have all of the Azog / Thorn plotline, which again, I felt like it was just way too long. I feel like all 3 movies were just way too long, first of all. 3 hours per movie, roughly. That's too much time. That's just too much. But I think if I could rewrite history, movie 1 would end at the point where the dwarves are captured by Lord Elrond, which is when they, right after the spider incident, that flickering in the book that Bilbo was seeing from afar is the wood elves, and Lord Elrond captures all of the dwarves, trying to capture Bilbo as well, but he has his little lucky ring. But Lord Elrond's purpose of this is to basically say, you guys were trying to kill my people or taunt my people, I don't appreciate it, so he captures them all. And I think that would have been a good stopping point for movie 1, because I think roughly at that point we're just under halfway through the book, and without all of this other filler context that wasn't initially provided, we could roughly make that about 2 hours long. And I think it would work. And then I think the way I would do movie 2, obviously would be everything else, but it would include, you know, Bilbo getting them out of Lord Elrond's, it would include all the stuff when it comes to Smaug. Also, they changed that a little bit as well, which I thought was interesting. But I think the way it was done in the book, again, was just better. In the book, Bilbo goes in by himself initially, or they all go in, but Bilbo goes farther in initially, just to prove he can steal something from Smaug. So he steals, I believe it's like a chalice of some sort. He brings it up to the dwarves and he goes, look guys, I'm pretty cool. I was able to do that, no problem. None at all. Thorin goes, hey guys, or hey buddy, get me that Arkenstone and we could talk. So Bilbo tries to go back and he has a brief conversation with the dragon this time, or with Smaug this time. And Smaug's like, it's a really similar conversation I actually do in the movie, where Smaug's basically like, I don't know what you are, buddy, but like, get the fuck out of here. Smaug ends up getting all angry and leaving. Little do Bilbo and the dwarves know, at least in the book, he's killed almost instantly. The dragon is killed almost instantly. However, in the movie, obviously they hype it up a little bit more, they play it out a bit more, he destroys more of the town. There's a little bit of implication in the book that he destroyed some of the town, but not nearly as catastrophic sounding or looking as it did in the movie. So then in the movie, or continuing into the book, because they don't know that Smaug's already killed, they're going through the mountain, they're going through Ereborn, trying to be discreet and not get caught by Smaug. So they end up going to one of the watchtowers nearby, or that's like connected to the mountain. And they go into there for safety, so they can sleep and also eat some food and continue to hopefully avoid Smaug. And then in addition to that, they end up seeing a raven. I wish so badly they included this in the movies. I thought this was awesome. But basically, there are these ravens that are also happen to be the watchtower, and one of the older members of the dwarf group, I believe it's Balin, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's Balin, can speak to the ravens. It's like this language, it's like a specific dialect basically, that old ravens and older dwarves can kind of understand. And the old ravens are being like, bro, Smaug's dead. Y'all been trotting around in that mountain for 3 days and bitch is dead. So they're like yee hee ha ha woohoo. And because of that and the previous context of the signs about the dragon and the other groups of beings that want to also take all the gold and riches from the mountain, Balin basically talks to the raven and is like, yo, you need to talk to our bros on Iron Hill, I think is what it's called. I don't remember. Another dwarf group, essentially. You need to talk to our besties, you need to tell them what the fuck is up, and get their asses here immediately. And the ravens are like, alright, cool, I guess. Ravens leave, they head over there, whatever happens, happens. And I thought that was really interesting and cool. And then in the movie, we just string out this whole, like, overly long chaos when it comes to dealing with the dragon. Like, a lot of it's all extra and strung out, like, for no reason. Couple things, or final notes, realistically. Legolas being in the Hobbit movies irks me very much. It's the same problem I have with all the plot lines they have regarding the Lord of the Rings movies, / book / whatever you want to call it. There's no reason to include him. Not one reason. Other than for us to go wink wink, nudge nudge, this is about the Lord of the Rings movies, and wink wink, nudge nudge, here's Legolas again. one of the final things I'll say as well that really irked me is the whole shit with the Arkenstone. So the whole time in the movies, Thorn, pretty much the whole time at least, Thorn's very much against Bilbo being a part of the group. He very much believes that Bilbo is nothing more than just a hobbit who belongs in the Shire and he shouldn't be out with them. All the way up until roughly right after they leave the Goblin Mountain. It's not the Mines of Moria, I confused a different thing, but the Goblin Mountain is what I'm gonna call it. Once they leave that, and Bilbo shows up, he takes off his ring, shows up, he's like, yo guys, I'm not dead. Thorin has a new respect for him, and it's very clear about that shift in the book. And I feel like in the movie, it's like somewhat shown, but not really. And then as farther we go in the movies, in movie 2, Thorin's still very clearly very hesitant about Bilbo, which again, this could have just been acting choices. And very much like not happy he's there, but in the time frame for movie 2 in the book, it's very clear that there's been a shift in how Thorin thinks Bilbo works in this group. Especially when it comes down to the whole thing with the spiders and Bilbo being able to get them out of Lord Elrond's place. Like, there's very clearly a shift in his demeanor towards Bilbo. And then, in the movies, when Bilbo goes in for the first time, it's very clear that Thorin also has this greed sickness, is what I call it. They wink wink nudge us in the movie about it, but in the at the start of the first movie, they wink wink nudge us. And then at the third movie, when they finally get in there and Bilbo's trying to find the Arkenstone, it's very clear that Thorin has the sickness. And it's very clear he's completely reverted all feelings he had about Bilbo back to the first night that he met Bilbo. And it felt very weird and harsh to me. Because in the book, yes, he does get kind of sicknessy, but it's not nearly this severe or this like abrupt. Instead, in the book, it's very clear that he has a newfound appreciation for Bilbo after the goblins, and a newfound appreciation after the Wood Elves problem, Lord Elrond's group. And then finally, an even greater appreciation after Bilbo steals the chalice first. It's very clear that Thorin's like, holy shit, this guy might actually be cool. And then he does get a little bit crazy, but it's because he can't find the Arkenstone and nobody's been able to find it. Bilbo has it in his pocket this whole time. But essentially, in the book, Thorin's more mad that he thinks someone's lying to him. He doesn't say who or have any like inclination towards anybody, but he feels that somebody's not telling the full truth. He's not lashing out at anybody, and from what I can remember, it might be wrong, but he's not. So he's not inherently lashing out at anybody, from what I can remember in the book. Other than he's very clear that his responses are much shorter. So instead of him saying, something more drawn out and more like bobbling around the point, instead he's very direct to the point and short in most of his responses. Up until Bilbo leaves, gives Bard and Lord Elrond the Arkenstone as a means of trading with Thorin. When that happens in the book and Thorin's like, oh my god, you little skeevy fool, it's very clear he's not happy that Bilbo did that. But again, it doesn't feel nearly as harsh as it does in the movie, in the third movie when that happens. It just doesn't feel nearly the same. So I feel like, I don't know, maybe there's just more liberties taken when it came to like the personalities of each of the characters. I really just feel that there were so many like personality liberties that were taken. I think part of that also though is we don't get to hear conversations or see much from every single dwarf in the little group of the 14 total members. We get little snippets here and there, and it's very clear that who their personalities are as we do that, but I think the movie, again, it was a little bit forced to take those turns and give us a little more context on each of them. But I don't know, it just really frustrated me that I just feel like it didn't feel the same, maybe as I wanted it to feel. Okay, so final thoughts. Overall, I think the book is really well written, and I think it has a lot of good storytelling. It does a good job at telling you what you need to know when you need to know it. Versus kind of what most movies do, where it kind of tells you before really you need to know. I feel like movies, especially modern movies, try to do this whole like very obvious foreshadowing, and it just doesn't really work very often in my opinion, or work well, that is. And I feel like in the book we were able to get away with it a little bit more because we're thrown into this world just like Bilbo is. So for example, with the whole thing with the spiders and the elves in the book, where they start having their feast, they kill all the lights and they move away. Same thing happens again, they kill the lights and move away. We're only given what Bilbo can see, hear, and knows. He knows that there's a light there, he knows he can hear jolly merry times, and as soon as he gets close enough, it's snuffed out and it's gone. And the book just does a really good job at keeping us at that level, and I feel like with the movies, it gives us too much of this, see, this is what's happening. In the first movie, in the very first night where Bilbo is with the group and they're camping basically on a mountainside. This only happens in the movie, but in the book, we don't necessarily note this, but based on other stories that Tolkien has written, we know that this context is true, but we tossed it in the movie, which I think this one was smart to include. As much as I beefed on everything else earlier, I think it was smart to include this piece as context. Basically, but they're on this mountain, everybody is asleep pretty much except for a couple members, Bilbo, Keely, Feely, Thorin, Balin, and Gandalf, I believe, are the only ones who are awake currently. And Bilbo kind of abruptly wakens because he hears a sound, he panics a little bit and goes, well, what was that? What the fuck was that? And Keely and Feely are kind of playing a joke on him, being like, oh, it's orcs, they come out at night and they do night raids and then they'll be gone in a flash. Thorin chimes in and is like, you really think that shit's funny? Really? You think that shit's fucking funny? And he turns away and kind of walks off, and it's very clear that Keely and Feely feel bad for saying that. Balin chimes into Bilbo because Bilbo's like, what the fuck? And Balin includes that the reason why Thorin takes this kind of stuff so seriously is because in the Battle of Moria, this is what I actually meant when I was talking about Moria previously, but in the Battle of Moria, the orcs had gotten there before the dwarves could get there to reclaim Moria. And unfortunately this caused a giant battle where Azog was the leader of that group, or at least that's the implication we get, is that he was the leader of that group of orcs, and he ends up killing Thorin's grandfather. So originally in Erebor in the Misty Mountain, Thorin's grandfather, Thror, I cannot say his name. Thror was the king, then came Thrain, which is Thorin's dad's name, and then Thorin. So those are the three reigning royalties essentially of Erebor. Azog kills his grandfather, Thror, and Thrain goes missing during this battle. Nobody knows what really happens. We get context later in the movie, doesn't matter right now. But according to Balin, Azog swears right then and there he's going to destroy the line of Durin, which is the entire family line of Thorin. He swears right then and there he's going to kill them all, eradicate them from this world, because he doesn't like them. So we see a little bit of this playing out as well as Balin is telling the story, and we see that Azog kills the grandfather. Thorin, in a fit of rage, tries to kill Azog. He gets his name Thorin Oakenshield because in the middle of this fight he loses his shield, he loses his sword, it looks like he's about to go down for good, and suddenly he raises an oaken branch and uses it as a shield, therefore making his name Thorin Oakenshield. Anywho, Thorin ends up slicing the arm off of Azog, and Azog's like screaming in pain and going like, ah, so the other orcs drag him back into the mines of Moria and they end up winning that battle. Balin finishes this by saying that statement, and Bilbo's very first question is, what happened to Azog? What happened? What happened? And Thorin's like, bestie, he died. He died from his wounds because I'm a bad bitch. Both Balin and Gandalf look at each other for a second after Thorin spins around again to look away. We see that Gandalf and Balin look at each other. I think we just should have stopped there with our little hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Because the very next scene we see is that Azog's alive. I'm not even exaggerating. I think it's either the very next scene or one scene after that we find out he's alive, and that's it. There's no, yes, them looking at each other was definitely a hint towards he's actually alive still. But I think we could have kept that just a little bit. We know that there's an orc pack chasing them. Yeah, we can make the assumption it's Azog. It could be somebody else though. You never know. I mean, clearly we know, but still, my point is we don't need to show the viewer so much of this context when we can figure it out ourselves, or be just as surprised as Thorin is when he realizes Azog's alive and his eyes go, what the fuck? Yeah, so that's kind of my overall opinion. I think, again, the movies do a good job of telling the story, but if you want the same feeling that you get when you watch the Lord of the Rings movies, only watch the first Hobbit. That's the one and stays closest to the book in my opinion, except for, it's only about a third of the book, but I think that stays closest to the book in all of that, and I think it sets the tone better than the other two movies do. The book I really liked overall because, again, we have these subtle nudges about certain things, again, the elves in the woods, and it's not being written to us, plastered on our faces type of thing. I think storytelling really well. I've said that several times. I think the way the characters are written is also very good. We see a lot of times, especially in like modern books a bit, that we don't provide a lot of context on who everybody is and what they look like and their demeanor. But with The Hobbit, when it comes down to Gandalf throwing the flaming pine cones, it's very clear that from Bilbo's perspective, Gandalf is scared, legitimately afraid of what's happening, and doesn't know what to do besides throwing these damn pine cones. He starts telling everyone else to do it. He tosses a pine cone to each of them that's lit on fire that they can use to light additional pine cones. And we see this. And then at the end of the battle, and Thorin is dying, spoiler alert, and Thorin's dying, in the book, we see that Gandalf is the first one to go, we need to find Bilbo. Thorin wants to apologize and we need to find Bilbo. They find Bilbo. Gandalf warns him a little bit beforehand and goes, hey, things aren't looking too great for Thorin, but he needs to talk to you. He needs to speak to you directly. And it's very clear that Gandalf emotionally wants them to have this conversation. It's not just a, hey bestie, you need to have this conversation. It's very much of a, it's important to me that you have this conversation with each other. And then they talk and everything's fine. But, yeah, that is my review. I did not get much of this hood done at all. I'm going to be filming at least one more of these in the next couple days, so I'm hoping to keep working on this then, and you'll see it a little bit. But hopefully you stuck around for this full 35-minute long video, or 30-ish minute long video. If you have any other books or movies you want me to review, let me know. I will greatly appreciate it, and I'll totally do it. If you have any different opinions for me, please leave them below. I would love to keep talking about this. Like I said, my husband's getting tired of it. I really hope you enjoyed today's video, and be sure to look out for other book reviews if that's something you're interested in, or you can look at some of my other craft vlogs or other videos I've made so far, and I will see you guys next week. Bye!